Snow and smoke covered the battlefield as thousands of soldiers struggled through the freezing chaos near the town of Austerlitz. Then the French disappeared. Across the hills, Russian and Austrian commanders believed Napoleon was retreating in fear. Entire Allied columns began marching forward to crush what looked like a weak French army collapsing under pressure. But it was a trap. Nearly 85,000 Allied soldiers were walking directly into one of the deadliest battlefield deceptions in military history, while Napoleon watched from the high ground waiting for the exact moment to strike. And within a few hours, the most powerful armies in Europe would begin collapsing in total confusion. December 1805. Europe believed Napoleon Bonaparte was finally vulnerable. Russia and Austria had united against France, gathering a massive army to destroy Napoleon before he could dominate the continent completely. Together, the Allied army fielded around 85,000 soldiers with hundreds of cannons stretching across the frozen countryside. Napoleon had roughly 65,000 men, outnumbered, far from France, and standing directly in front of two empires. But what the Allies did not understand was that Napoleon wanted them to believe he was weak. French troops deliberately abandoned key positions around the Pratzen Heights. Campfires burned through the cold night while French soldiers appeared exhausted, exposed, and vulnerable. To the Allied commanders, it looked like the perfect opportunity to crush Napoleon forever. That illusion would destroy them. Before sunrise, thick fog covered the battlefield. Russian and Austrian columns began moving downhill through the freezing mist, believing they were attacking Napoleon's weak right flank. Thousands of Allied soldiers marched away from the center of the battlefield, pulling troops off the Pratzen Heights, the most important position in the entire region. This was exactly what Napoleon wanted. From the hills, French scouts watched the enemy columns slowly disappear into the fog. Messengers raced through the French lines as Napoleon waited for the perfect moment to attack. Then he turned to his commanders and reportedly asked, "How long will it take your men to reach the heights?" The answer came back, "Less than 20 minutes." Napoleon looked toward the fog-covered battlefield and gave the order. As the morning fog began lifting, sunlight suddenly broke across the battlefield. French soldiers surged forward directly toward the weakened Allied center. The attack hit with terrifying speed. Russian and Austrian troops, still moving downhill, suddenly realized the disaster unfolding behind them. Officers screamed orders through the smoke as soldiers desperately tried turning back toward the Pratzen Heights. But it was too late. French infantry slammed into the center while artillery opened fire across the frozen ground. Cannon smoke rolled through the sunlight as formations began collapsing into confusion. This moment became legendary as the Sun of Austerlitz. Napoleon's army had split the Allied force in half. Now the battlefield itself began turning into chaos, and thousands of soldiers suddenly found themselves trapped in the wrong position while the French closed in from multiple directions. By midday, the Allied army was falling apart. Russian cavalry launched desperate counterattacks while Austrian units struggled to regroup through smoke, mud, and frozen terrain. Wounded soldiers covered the battlefield as cannons blasted holes through packed formations at close range. French troops kept advancing. Everywhere the Allies tried to stabilize the line, new French attacks crashed into them. Some soldiers fled across frozen lakes south of the battlefield while artillery shells exploded across the ice. Panic spread rapidly as entire formations lost communication with their commanders. The battlefield no longer looked organized. It looked like survival. Napoleon rode across the field watching the collapse happen in real time as exhausted Allied troops retreated in every direction under relentless pressure from French cavalry and artillery. The trap had completely succeeded. By the end of the battle, the Allied army had been shattered. Tens of thousands of Russian and Austrian soldiers were killed, wounded, captured, or scattered during the retreat. French losses were heavy too, but Napoleon had achieved one of the greatest victories of his entire career. Austerlitz destroyed the Third Coalition. Austria soon sued for peace. Russian forces withdrew eastward. And across Europe, rulers realized something terrifying. Napoleon was no longer just winning battles. He was redesigning warfare itself. What made Austerlitz so dangerous was not only the victory, it was the deception. Napoleon convinced an entire enemy army that he was weak, then destroyed them the moment they believed it. For many historians, Austerlitz was the moment Napoleon Bonaparte reached the absolute peak of his power.